Good evening and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. The public can attend tonight's meeting in person at the George DeSierro City and County Building located at 1 Tacoma Drive or watch live on Channel 8 through live streaming on Broomfield's website. The public may also participate in public comment either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. Please note that if you're calling in for public comment and would like to speak on more than one agenda item, you'll need to press *3 each time to be placed back in the queue for comment. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 have 2 minutes. And if time remains, the next 26 plus participants have 1.5 minutes to speak. Again, if joining virtually for public comment, the number is 855-695-3744 and press *3 to be placed in the queue. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last name and neighborhood and the agenda item the caller would like to comment on. Please call several minutes before the agenda item and press *3 to ensure you're in the queue for comments. If joining in person, we'll ask you to come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. The City Council meeting is called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson.
Here.
Cohen.
Here.
Hinkle.
Here.
Jazerski.
Here.
Leslie.
Here.
Lim.
Here.
Lindstedt.
Here.
Marshall.
Here.
Here remote.
Schaff.
Here.
Ward.
Here.
Thank you. A quorum is present. Will everyone please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In an effort to keep order for tonight's meeting, I ask council members to limit their comments to 5 minutes. If council members are given a second opportunity to speak, they should limit their comments to 2 minutes. The clerk will be assisting with timekeeping and council members will be able to see their time on the podium. We will plan on a 10-minute break at approximately 8 p.m. We'll begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Council may add or remove items from the consent agenda, or council may revise the order of business for the meeting. Does any member of the council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? Councilmember Marshall, who's joining us remotely.
Thank you, Mary. Yes, I'd like to move item 7B off the consent agenda so we can discuss the issue regarding replacement of vehicles with electric vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you. Noted. That will be the first item of the business agenda. Councilmember Shell.
Thank you, Mayor. So I wasn't quite sure if 11B was a public hearing, which doesn't seem to be, but I was curious with that change if council would entertain moving that to the consent agenda.
Oh, yeah. Any objections? Seeing none, that's for the Broadlands Advisory. Is there a reason we can't?
Mayor, we're checking quickly to see if it fits into the public category. We're thinking that it does.
Okay. We'll give you a second. I know I got a postcard about it too. Okay, I'm sorry, Councilmember Shaw, we have to have the public hearing. Nice try. Next is petitions and communications. This evening, we would like to welcome the student representatives from Broomfield Heights Middle School No Place for Hate Coalition for a brief presentation. Will the members of the No Place for Hate Coalition please come up to the podium? Thank you all for joining this evening, and we are looking forward to learning more on this topic. I'll now pass it over to you to present.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me fine?
Yeah.
So in this slideshow, we would like to explain our goals as a No Place for Hate Coalition, and what we're feeling them with. We would also like to spread awareness for bullying and hate going on in the community that we don't know about, because there's a lot more that we don't know about that's going on. We would like to help get rid of parts of that from the community by just spreading awareness about hate. Next slide, please. I'm Rachel. I'm in 8th grade. I'm going to be talking about what No Place for Hate is and how it was started. So it's an anti-bullying and violence group in schools formed by the ADL, Anti-Defamation League. And it is about accepting everybody and making schools and other communities safe, comfortable places to be. I believe that it's very important that there's something like this in a lot of schools and other communities, because it's important for everybody to feel accepted and know that hate and violence is not something that we should be having in communities. Next slide, please.
This is the No Place for Hate pledge that we like to say at our meetings, just to refresh ourselves of what we do. Next slide, please. Why do we do the No Place for Hate pledge? We do the No Place for Hate pledge for two reasons. So people can get a better understanding of what it's about and what we're trying to turn our school and community into, and it's a way for other people to pledge participation into helping us, so there's no discrimination in our community. And I'm Heidi Davis. I'm in 8th grade, and I believe there should not be any discrimination against anyone. Next slide, please.
Some activities we have done in the past that have worked out were we paired out with Broomfield days, we handed out bracelets and explained our goal. Another activity we did was we had an ice cream social and invited other schools to this and explained. We also had a photo booth at a school social, just as a photo shoot. And we've also had multiple video announcements at our school, lessons about No Place for Hate. I'm Macy Lentz, and I'm in 6th grade. I believe that everyone should be accepted no matter who they are. Next slide, please. Our short-term goals are spreading the No Place for Hate message through posters and a website dedicated to No Place for Hate, and seeing people find out what No Place for Hate is, because generally we've included schools in No Place for Hate, and we wanted to spread it to the community. And we just wanted to see a good difference in the community, like just people helping each other and seeing kindness towards others. Our long-term goals are spreading awareness about No Place for Hate to other schools and throughout the community, and informing all people of all ages about acceptance, bullying, speaking out, and being a good person. I believe that we should be kind to one another no matter what.
Hi, my name is Nora Martin, and I'm in 8th grade. We would like, this slide's about how we would like your help. We would love your help advertising and getting the word out. This could be done through, like social media or flyers, or just like word of mouth. Another thing we would like is helping us find a good day to do this, or to have like a day. And so we would just like, we have some, I think the next slides are about our dates. And so we would just like some input about that. Another thing we would like is like just your thoughts on like our goals, and like help us to create the date. we would like your feedback and your thoughts on how we can make it better. I volunteer and I would like, we were hoping to get some, I haven't talked to these organizations yet, but we would like to talk to some different organizations and see if we can maybe like make a web page to list all our information or like resources in one place. And I believe that it's important to have this day because we need to think about how our actions affect others more often and how, whether or not it's intentional, why hate like originates. And I think it's important to like recognize everybody's differences and how they're important to make a healthy, happy community. Thank you.
So these are some of the dates that we thought would work best, and we thought these dates would work best because there's not that many like federal holidays or community holidays around these dates. And obviously they're very flexible, so if there's a date that you think that would work better or maybe not at all. And so yeah, we're very open to that. Thank you guys for taking the time to include us in your city council meeting this evening.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. The courage and the compassion is contagious. And what you're doing is sending out a ripple, a wave that's just going to get bigger. I'm going to let council comment now. Does any member of council have any comments? Mayor Pro Tem.
So that was a great presentation, guys. Much better than I can do now, and 10 times better than I would have been able to do when I was your age. So do appreciate that. Is this in any other schools besides, you guys are based in Broomfield Heights Middle School, is that right?
Yes, we are based out of Brookfield High School, and there are plenty of other schools and school districts, like in our school district, as well as other states and other districts inside of our state. There's lots of schools like nationwide that have no place to live.
Any other ones in Broomfield that you know about?
I want to say that they were trying to get one to start at the high school. Don't know if they succeeded yet or not. I don't know if they got enough members, but they're definitely working towards efforts. And I can't think of any off the top of my head right now.
It sounds like that's something that you guys were trying to work on as well. I saw that one of your events was to sort of raise awareness to the other schools.
Hi, my name is Paula Kaufman. I'm a teacher at Brookfield Heights Middle School. I'm extremely proud of these people. Emerald Elementary has a very strong No Place for Hate coalition. Some of the kids joined us after being a part of that one. Broomfield High School, it does not, because they have another club. It takes on the same kind of topics. Birch does not, and that's all I know of in our Boulder Valley, Broomfield area.
We need to get you to reach across the tracks over to the Adams 12 side. You can do that. But yeah, this is sounds like a great organization, and I really appreciate you guys coming down here tonight.
Councilmember Lindstedt.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say, as a former student of Ms. Kaufman's years ago, how happy I am. And we see a lot of presentations on City Council, and this is one that I will definitely remember. So thank you for your advocacy and for all the work you're doing to make the Broomfield Heights community better, stronger, more inclusive, and more resilient. And it's really great to see you, Ms. Kaufman. So.
Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for being here, and I see the parents in the room too. This is very exciting. I have a daughter who is very much all about teaching me about different genders too, the things that I did not even know about, and so I just really appreciate. We learn so much from kids. And the more that we learn from kids, just the better off as parents that we can be. You guys are, you all are setting a great example for our community, and I look forward to how this would unfold. And I am all about creating a day for this. And I will be wearing my pin and also my wristband as well tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Shah.
Thank you, Mayor. So when I got this email from these students, it was very much a proud teacher moment as well as a proud community member. This is one of those conversations when the youth lead in our community, when youth step up to engage the rest of the community to make positive contributions as well as to have those tough conversations. So it's one of those opportunities in which I think that myself took the opportunity to listen. Thank you for coming tonight and your courage to come in front of a public body and a public meeting to have this conversation. I do look forward to learning more about your organization, the lessons that you've been engaging with in your schools, but also how we can continue to partner and create a positive community conversation. So thank you for your engagement. I look forward to following up and looking at more possibilities to engage around the state. It seems like that's one of the first steps. So thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. Any other council member comments? Don't see any hands raised. Well, your ask was to have a proclamation of an official day for No Place for Hate. And as mayor, I get to do those proclamations. So I will talk with staff about these 3 dates and we will find one that works best and we'll let you know. And we will do a proclamation of an official day. Thank you. All right. We will move to public comment next. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on matters other than the items already listed on this evening's agenda. As mentioned earlier, the public may comment both in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and press *3. If you're joining in person, please line up behind the podium and the public comments will be limited to the time limits outlined earlier. We will start with in-person public comment. If there's anyone who would like to be heard, please step up to the podium. I'll give them some time to clear out.
Good evening.
Hello.
Before they all run out of the room, I wanted to say I'm from the Adams 12 5-Star Schools Board of Education, and I wanted to say, way to go. Question back to my district, and we will find out if we have any No Place for Hate organizations and get them hooked up and try to make that connection, and also other organizations. And I love the idea of the proclamation, and and I think them being in leaders, but making sure we include all the organizations, again, like they were saying, that have that same focus. And I think that would be excellent. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
How quick that communication.
Did you have anything else to add, Borough member?
I did. I didn't know they were going to be here, but I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Laura Mitchell, as many of you know. This is my 7th year serving on the Adams 12 5-Star Schools Board of Education. And I am now the Broomfield liaison on our board. And Kathy Plumber, our longtime serving member of our school district and our board, has been turned out, and so I am now going to get to fill that spot and be in my own home city of Broomfield and try to be and do the best I can and liaison for our city and county. So if you have anything you're interested in, please feel free to reach out to me. Would love to be able to do that for you. And I just wanted to share some points of pride. And I do get very emotional. I apologize. It's just genetics. It's got all the kids, so so our school district has been a performance rated school district for 6 years in a row now, and that includes our academic achievement, our academic growth, our post-secondary and workforce readiness are some of the key measures in that. And I wanted to point out that we have doubled the number of career and tech ed educational opportunities to our students. And this was through the bond and mill levy override that was supported by our community and allowed us to expand those facilities and open our new Washington Square building and do a huge remodeling effort on our existing campus at Bowman. I would like to open an invitation to any of you at any time if you'd like to go and tour any of our facilities or CTE, learn more about them. We'd be happy to coordinate that. I also wanted to say, in alignment with your affordability, your affordable housing and your homeless work that you try to do, I wanted to let you know that we served 4 million meals. 4 million meals to our community from March of 2020 through the summer of 2021. And we also made home visits to approximately maybe I'll be able to see my notes a little better. We had 1,000 families that we went to visit, and we took meals. We provided resources, mobile hotspots, Chromebooks, and just checking on our students, their attendance, and their ability to engage in our online learning. As a result of a lot of the pandemic work that we did, we are now a 1-to-1 district, and we provide each of our students with a Chromebook. And of course, in our challenge department, we have ongoing work, and hardship through the pandemic and trying to keep our kids in classrooms and keep everyone safe. But as many people are aware, we still suffer from underfunding in our schools, and from the money that during the recession recovery where school districts were hit hard, we are still at $27 million in the hole from state funding as a result of that reduction work that they do and the accounting that they're keeping just this year alone, 27 million. It's been larger in the past, but and that's accounting for inflation. That's how we're calculating this. And so it really is hard and challenging to do the work that we're doing, and especially in light of, the expanding needs of our students. Over the last decade, our student homeless population has doubled. It went from 2% of our student population to now 4%, which is around 1,300 students. And in the more positive and related to the group that was just here, we have begun work in our equity review process. It's an extension of the strategic plan we did with Elevate. So we're continuing to do that work.
You're not.
Okay. So in that work, we've already completed reviewing 79 of our policies. We've had 15,000 community members, family, staff complete our survey. We've had listening sessions. And we're looking at things like discipline, course enrollment, staff attrition, staff development, and analyzing all that data. Our goal is to ensure access, opportunity, and a sense of belonging for each student and staff member within our district. We also have we started an initiative called Blueprint 2032. And as many of you, I'm sure, are aware, part of that work, it includes our new school up and baseline that we need to reduce overcrowding at some of our, in particular, Legacy is one of our most overcrowded schools, and to provide, again, more STEM and CTE capacity for students. That is a really exciting opportunity that we can't wait to get started and explore some other more less engineering and math, and get more into the real, some more science related to, the butterfly pavilion and some of that, the ability, that alignment with those, with the work going on there. We have we did a survey with 4,000 parents about what their priorities were for our future. 75% came back and said that they felt that our facilities were at good or excellent, which was really encouraging. But what would come as no surprise to people who drive around Legacy High School, traffic flow and self-service around some of our schools is another priority. So, there's security things and those kinds of things, but we'll be getting to work on those. We did have a baseline listening session set up for Thunder Vista, but the night that was the snowstorm, so that will be rescheduled. So please, keep an eye on that, and we'll try to do the best we can and hope for a lot of community engagement. We did complete the one at Northwind that week, Northwind High School, and the feedback we got was very positive. So lots of exciting things happening, and just excited to be here with you tonight. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mitchell. Ms. Mitchell is also a member of our Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority Board of Directors. So she was here anyway, and I appreciate that update. All right, any other public comment before we move on items not on the agenda? I don't see anyone online. So council's community and event updates are next. Does any member of council have an update this evening? Dr. Leslie. Councilmember Leslie?
I'm both. I just wanted to let you know that neighbors stopped me this week to tell me how pleased they were with the snow plowing. Not necessarily on the suburban streets in our neighborhoods, but the main streets. That they saw the plows out constantly trying to clear everything up while people were trying to travel, particularly with their grandkids, to take them to different places and stuff. They wanted me to make special note to the team, Jennifer, that, excuse me, I'm not used to these title or things, but City and County Manager Kaufman, to compliment the team for the good work that they did with this last storm. Thank you.
We certainly appreciate that. I'm looking at the chief person that is sitting in the back right now, so thanks very much, Mr.
My glasses on.
Well done, team. Thank you. And we sure appreciate that shout out, Councilmember Leslie.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Mitchell, for being here tonight. I can't see you out there if you're still there. There you are. And I would be remiss, I joined Laura at the North Glen High School in December for the North Glen High School STEM PBL, problem-based learning program. I would invite any of my council colleagues to ensure do that sometime. It's a great way to participate with those students, learn from them. This also is an invitation to all of you community members. They often, well, they always need experts in fields, even knowledgeable people in fields, just willing to engage these students. These students are learning about a particular problem that they're looking to solve within their curriculum. And so they need that experience of engaging with adults, engaging with people in these fields. And so if this is something that you're willing to do, they would love to have you there. So North Glen High School, the PBL STEM program. So please, if that's something that you would like to do, please engage them. The other thing that I wanted to do, and I've already sent this to council yesterday at the Rocky Flat Stewardship Council, we had a great conversation about what would be the mitigation and response if there was a fire, when there is a fire. There has been a fire, many fires over the last many years. So this is nothing new, but we had a conversation about what the response would be like if there was a fire there, what they're doing in terms of now seeing the rapid movement that happened with the Marshall Fire and what kind of a perfect storm that was. And so looking at doing further mitigation there on Rocky Flats and looking at some of those issues that may still be there in terms of community connectedness, looking at how do we communicate that result. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can go to the Rocky Flat Stewardship Council site, review that meeting. The other piece of this is there were some comments, including myself, that we're looking to, that there's further conversation that needs to happen around that. Not only just the fire response and mitigation, but also what are the health impacts there. One of the things that they had a conversation early on was that based on modeling, there is no risk factor if there is a fire there, but they don't necessarily have the air monitoring to kind of show us that there isn't any risk. And so we've had some conversations about should we have some air monitoring stations out there that when there is a fire, and again, there's been a fire out there every year, that we can basically demonstrate that there is no risk or there is no risk to those populations around there because of that fire. But that is something that we need to do. So that will be a further conversation maybe in the next 2 quarters, maybe 3 quarters or so when we have that conversation. So just wanted to let council and the community know. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim?
For young adult job seekers and possible employers, the Broomfield Workforce Center and Broomfield Chamber of Commerce will hold a young adult virtual job fair on March 2nd from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Young adults can register on the Broomfield Workforce Career Fair page, and employers should contact the Broomfield Workforce Center. On a different topic, Broomfield invites the community to join the Sustainability Film Series on Thursday, February 17th at 6:30 p.m. for the film 2040, which envisions what the future would look like if we used the solutions already available to us. There's a question and answer following it. You need to register in advance on the Broomfield Voice Sustainability page or the ACES homepage. We encourage everyone to attend. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lindsay?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to remind my colleagues here and any interested members of the public that this Friday is the Brookfield County Transportation Forum from 1 to 3:30. This Friday, the big item we're going to be talking about is the 2022 to 2025 tip call. So if you want to get up to speed and or engage, I welcome all of you to attend. That's this Friday from 1 to 3:30 on Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member updates? All right, we'll move on. Council's consideration of the consent agenda is next. The clerk will read all of the consent agenda items by title, and there will be one opportunity for public comment and council questions. Council will then be asked to approve the consent agenda with two separate motion items, as 7E is a request for an executive session and requires an individual motion. Also, just a reminder that item 7B was moved to the council business and will be reviewed later in the meeting. Following the clerk's reading of consent agenda items 7A, 7C through E, we will ask for public comments. Will the clerk please read agenda items 7A and 7C through E by title?
7A, approval of minutes from January 25th, 2022 regular meeting. 7C, resolution number 2022-12, authorizing and approving the purchase of de-icing materials from Envirotech Services Inc. for the 2022 snow and ice control program. 7D, ordinance number 2174, amending chapter 2-44 and adding chapter 8-45 to the Broomfield Municipal Code, requiring the council adopt a noxious weed management plan. First reading. 7E, motion for executive session for the purpose of providing legal advice related to local financial assurances for oil and gas facilities.
Thank you. Does any member of the public have comments on these agenda items? We'll start with in person. If so, please step up to the podium. And I don't see any online. Does any member of council have comments on these agenda items? Seeing none, is there a motion that the recommendations contained in the staff reports for agenda items 7A, 7C through 7D be approved? Thank you, Councilmember Lidley. Is there a second? Councilmember Shaw?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Council members Marsh-Holston and Cohen are joining us virtually. Therefore, we'll use roll call voting this evening. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson?
Yes.
Cohen?
Yes.
Hinkle?
Yes.
Jazerski?
Yes.
Leslie?
Yes.
Lim?
Yes.
Lindstedt?
Yes.
Marshall?
Yes.
Shaw?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Next is the council's consideration of consent agenda item 7E, a request for an executive session. Will the city and county attorney please read the motion?
That an executive session be held on March 1st, 2022, prior to council's study session for the purpose of providing legal advice related to a local financial assurances ordinance applicable to oil and gas facilities pursuant to CRS section 24.6.402.4B.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Ward?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mayor Pro Tem? Sure. Thank you. Is there any discussion? As a reminder, requests for executive session require an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board present. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Cohen?
Yes.
Hinkle?
Yes.
Jazerski?
Guess I need to vote in favor of it now. Yes.
Leslie?
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Lindsted,
Yes.
Marshallson,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes. Thank you. That passes unanimously. There is no business before the Board of Social Services this evening. We have the COVID-19 update for the Board of Health's review this evening. The meeting of the Board of Health is called to order. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll for the Board.
Anderson,
Here.
Cohen,
Here.
Hinkle,
Here.
Jezerski,
Here.
Leslie,
Here.
Lim, Lindsted,
Here.
Marshallson,
Here.
Schaff,
Here.
Ward.
Thank you. A quorum is present. Board members have a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council and community. Jason Bolling, Director of Public Health, and I do believe that Fettersville is also here. I think this is the first COVID update that there is actually some really positive outlook. So please share that with us.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Hoffman, and good evening, Mayor and council members. It's been a ride, we're quickly approaching 2 years of dealing with COVID in Broomfield, and we know there have been a lot of ups and downs for our community. But I can say one thing we've learned through this pandemic is, first of all, the science is continually evolving, and I can understand how that can be challenging for the public and our residents to understand the science that's coming out on a daily basis. So we have that continued commitment to share the most up-to-date science that drives our decision-making. Secondly, is we're dealing with different viruses. When we first started out, we were dealing with the wild strain, then we had the alpha variant, and then we had the Delta variant, which we knew was more severe, led to what we saw, increased hospitalizations as we were going through the fall and winter months. And now we moved on to the Omicron variant, which is much more transmissible, but not as severe as we're seeing with the Delta variant. And so that's good news that we're moving into this place of dealing with a specific variant of virus that isn't nearly as severe as what we were dealing with before. What we're seeing specifically across the state and in Broomfield, and when I sent our email out on rescinding our mask order, I was doing projections on the latest science, and I was praying that would it come true, and we're seeing it actually is coming true, which is really good news. Our case trends are dramatically declining in all age groups in Broomfield, and that's happening across the state. But to illustrate that, we've had a drop from 1,437 case rate on January 10th to 200 case rate on February 7th. And that just shows how steep that slope is as far as our declining cases. Secondly, our percent positivity, which was at an extremely high level of 27.85 on January 7th, is now down to 11.5. So again, both of those indicators heading in the right direction. We still know that when we look at cases, we're at a place of higher transmission. We acknowledge that. And we also acknowledge that our percent positivity level should be 5% or below for us to be able to effectively capture what's happening in the community. But all indications are leading to that we'll get there in the month of February based on our projections. Adding to that, the Colorado School of Public Health does their modeling data, and they predict a significant drop in cases and hospitalizations in February. The reason for that is they estimate that 80% of the population will be immune to Omicron by mid-February, and that's due to not only to vaccination rates, but also to infection. This virus is much more transmissible and has infected more people. And so what we're seeing is that will lead to a greater level of immunity for all of Colorado. That will lead to hopefully a lull over the next few months, both in severity and hopefully in cases too. And I don't want to overpromise here, but we do hope that we start to see that happen again, assuming no other variants
emerges that's more transmissible and more severe. And then on top of that, we know that when we go into the summer months, we have decreased transmission as well as more people are outdoors doing things. So we are cautiously optimistic that over the next few months and leading into the summer, we'll get back to a little bit more of normalcy. We are also seeing that hospitalizations are declining across the state. And specifically in Broomfield, we had 41 hospitalizations in January. That was higher than what we had in December, but we believe it was both due to the Delta variant, because that's a lagging factor. When you look at hospitalizations, it's usually 2 weeks for hospital admissions to show up. And then on top of that, just the sheer number of cases that we were seeing on the unvaccinated individuals that were being hospitalized. So both of those were a factor that led to increased hospitalizations over the month of January, but we are seeing that is declining and declining significantly since January 19th. Even greater good news is that hospitalizations in the North Central region have declined sharply from 1,035 COVID positive hospitalizations on January 18th to 552 on February 6th. And a reason for this is we're seeing with the Omicron variant versus the Delta variant, when we were looking at those individuals that were hospitalized specifically due to COVID, we saw that around 80% during the Delta variant were hospitalized due to COVID instead of with COVID. And the difference between that is COVID was the main reason you were going to the hospital versus going into the hospital for another reason and being tested and then finding out you have COVID. We're finding with the Omicron variant that actually proportion is decreasing. So it's around 60% of individuals that are going in due to COVID. And we see that number continue to drop. So again, leads to the indication that severity isn't nearly as bad with this current variant. And then on top of that, our ICU capacity is finally over 10%. So we've increased to 11% in the North Central region. And we know that's what we in Broomfield have been looking at all along, is what are we contributing to the hospital system, and we don't want to breach our healthcare system. So we'll continue to monitor that. That's good news. What we are seeing is not as much of a dramatic decline in that or increase in the ICU capacity, because we have more people going in that are seeking care. So you're seeing the significant drop in COVID cases within the hospital system, but what we're still seeing is ICU capacity isn't increasing on that same level. And that's to be expected because of all the delayed care we had over the past 2 years. We are strongly recommending to our residents that they stay up to date on vaccines, which is receiving their primary series and the booster. Currently, 59.7% of our eligible Broomfield residents are up to date. That means they've received their primary series and their booster. So we have a ways to go there for people to be fully up to date. And then in our 70 plus population, we just reached over 80% of our eligible 70 plus population that are up to date on their vaccines. That's really good news. The reason this is so important is data is coming out that is showing how effective the vaccines are in preventing hospitalizations and deaths, specifically when you're up to date on your vaccines. So vaccinated people that are up to date are 17.3 times less likely to be hospitalized and 58.8 times less likely to die from COVID compared to those unvaccinated people. And this is specifically from Colorado data, not national data. We have made the decision to remove our face covering order, and we're doing this along with most of the Denver metro counties. That does not mean that we do not continue to recommend people wear face coverings when they're out in public, especially during high transmission. We are communicating the effectiveness of face coverings. So obviously the K95 masks provide that greatest level of protection. not only from potentially spreading the virus to others, but also from protecting yourself from getting the virus. And that's very important as you're going in, and others may not be wearing masks if you're wearing that high degree of respiratory protection. It will protect you. Additionally, with that, we're also recommending and strongly recommending to our parents in Broomfield that they get themselves up to date on their vaccines, but more importantly, get their kids vaccinated. That is the best strategy to prevent COVID within the household and to prevent passing it on to potentially vulnerable individuals within the community or within your household. And then lastly, what I would say is we're moving to a place as a nation, and specifically in Colorado, of learning to live with this virus. So we have definitely seen the peaks and the valleys of the COVID pandemic, where we've been in places where we don't have as high of case rates or hospitalizations, and other periods of time where we have significantly high case rates and hospitalizations. As we start to learn to live with the virus, we're at a place of communicating those public health recommendations to our community and asking our residents, our business community, our school systems, and others to continue to implement those mitigation strategies. And part of that is Adam's 12 was here. We had multiple conversations with them, and also with BBSD. BBSD is still taking the approach of universal masking or face covering with their students. Brookfield Public Health totally supports that. Great decision based on their current specific information and factors they're looking at. Adams 12 has taken a different perspective, looking at their vaccination rates among their teachers and their students. Also looking at having specific face covering in place for those individuals that may be at high risk. So those highly protective face masks that I was mentioning. And then most importantly, ensuring that we don't have any discrimination or bullying going on for those individuals that still choose to wear face coverings. And so I fully trust, based on my conversations with Superintendent Godowski, that they know how to manage this virus after doing it for 2 years and are in a good place to take it as we hand it over to them. And then we're going to continue our focus on mitigation. And so what that includes is increasing booster uptake in all of our age groups, as I mentioned before. We also have to increase vaccination rates in our 5 to 11-year-old population. We're only at 57% of kids in that age group that have received their vaccine. So we need to get that up as much as possible. We are planning for vaccinating the 6 months to 4-year-olds once that's approved by the FDA and the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. We're hearing that February 15th is when the FDA may consider the data from Pfizer for that vaccine. And then also, most importantly, tracking new variants. We know we're not out of the woods yet. That's part of living with this virus, is if we see a new variant that emerges that again is much more severe, we have to look at more of those stronger mitigation steps in the future. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that update, Director Volley. We'll now proceed with public comment. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak, please step up to the podium. I'm not seeing any online, so we'll go to Board of Health member comments. Any Board of Health comments, questions? Go ahead, Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm glad to hear that there has been ongoing conversation with the school districts, and it sounds like that you know, with the expiring mask mandate public health order that we had, that there was some communication with our business community as well as with our community. I do believe that that there were people that were caught off guard with the expiration. I think that I don't think that was clear. I think that there was a date out there, but in terms of metrics and how that was going to end, was a little ambiguous. And I think that it just kind of ended and everybody thought, well, are we in a good place? Or did we just forget to, re-up this? So there's been I've gotten a lot of questions around why did it end? And did it just end because we didn't re-up it? Or are you waiting until your meeting on Tuesday to extend this? What are the metrics in terms of allowing this to expire?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Councilmember Schaaf. One thing we've also valued throughout this pandemic, and I've heard loud and clear from this board, is that we prefer to have regional alignment in our public health orders. And as we went through the process of deliberations as the Metro Denver Partnership for Health and looking at the latest modeling data, and then specifically having conversations with not just the school districts in Broomfield, but across the Denver metro region, it became very apparent we were in this place of needing to do a transition. And what was happening is all of our orders were expiring in early February. And so we could have extended them, but it would have been for another month or potentially longer. And when we started to weigh the cost benefit of that based on what we saw from the modeling data and also from what we've heard from our key stakeholders, we thought that this was the appropriate time to make the decision.
Okay. You had talked about that there are factors leading to the universal masking in BBSD and there are decisions to do that. I'd love to hear what those factors are. Again, this is where I'm getting a lot of questions, is that, it seems that there's metrics for removing universal masking in the Broomfield community, and that those have been met, and thus, we've allowed the public health order to expire. But what are those metrics? What are those factors that are leading to the continued universal masking within BBSD? And what are we recommending to them?
Sure.
So they're looking to us. The school districts are looking to us.
Sure, definitely. Well, one thing that obviously comes into play is absenteeism rates, not only from staff members, but potentially from students. And that's where we heard a little bit different between Boulder Valley School District and Adams 12. Boulder Valley School District felt that it was prudent for them to keep the universal mask order in place to ensure they can continue those smooth operations over a period of time. Adams 12 didn't have that same specific concern. The second thing that we've heard from Boulder Valley is that they're operating under Boulder County Public Health's order. And Boulder County has made the decision at this point not to align with the region, but to keep their mask order in place. And so that's another key factor, is that BBSD is following that Boulder order. And then more importantly, they have the right to decide how they want to apply that. And they've decided they want, for operations purposes, to apply it to the entire district. And we respect that.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your presentation you made here.
Thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on Councilmember Schaaf's questions, because I too was concerned about removing the mask from schools so quickly. In that Boulder Valley, Denver, the largest school district, are still masking. Pretty much all the universities are continuing to mask. And I may have mentioned 300 or 400 times my wife is a teacher. So I've had an earful from her and from other teachers about feeling very vulnerable and being sacrificed yet again for expediency in the perception that, unfortunately, we're seeing an intersection of medical science and political science, and that political pressure weighed heavily in moving ahead, perhaps before the numbers get us there. So my concern is that we keep track of these numbers and prepare for the possibility that we may have to go back. I'm hoping that the level of immunity will keep the numbers down, but I know, speaking for a teacher, they're in a small windowless classrooms with 100, 150 kids a day, and most of them are not vaccinated, and they do have concerns. So I hope that'll be taken into account. And I will just mention, I'm on Zoom tonight because my daughter tested positive for COVID today. And I'd spent a couple hours with her yesterday. So it's still here. It's still a concern. And I hope that folks in the community keep that in mind, that there are still vulnerable people amongst us who that can't take a vaccine and who rely on a mask and others masking to keep them safe, and to keep that in mind in the community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Cohen, for that question. We are committed to continually looking at the data with our districts and seeing what is happening. The other part of that I would talk about, and my wife is an assistant principal in a school district as well, so I got to earful as much as everybody else. But that being said, when we had conversations with the schools, there was a discussion that, you know, we have the opportunity for our teachers to be up to date on their vaccines. So first of all, that choice for those individuals working in the school system to make sure that they're fully vaccinated. We still realize there will be breakthrough cases. That is going to happen. No vaccine's perfect, but that's the best measure that we can put in place. The second thing I would say when we're looking at safety, again, is we now have K95 masks that we didn't have available early on in the pandemic that individuals can wear, especially if they are medically vulnerable, to be able to protect themselves, a well-fitting mask. And so that is one thing that has changed a little bit our approach to looking at masking. And you're seeing this discussion not only happen in Broomfield, but it's happening across the entire nation as more and more states are looking at potentially ending mandates within their communities and schools.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
Yes, I was encouraged to see that the city is going to have some short vaccine clinics, short-hour vaccine clinics at Health and Human Services coming up on Wednesdays, I believe. I'm hoping that encourages people to go get boosters. I'm a little perplexed. Do you understand, is there misinformation that's out there that there's such a lower level of booster adoption versus getting the initial vaccine?
Excellent question, and that's being debated nationally by all of the scientists right now of what's going on, because the assumption obviously was is if we had people that were fully vaccinated, they already were inclined to receive the vaccine. So being up to date on receiving their booster wouldn't be as challenging. I think there's two factors that are playing into that. One is when you look at the overall severity of hospitalizations, we still see that it's fairly low if you're fully vaccinated and not up to date. So you still have that high level of protection. And what we're hearing through a lot of our ambassadors and others is questions, is it worth it to get the booster? And that's why we're starting to present this data. The second thing is we really need to ourselves, but just as a public health system, start to communicate which individuals are at risk and how important it is for them to stay up to date on their vaccines. And so we're infusing that into all of our messaging. And that's part of the clinics that we've agreed to do at HHS, is trying to do targeted outreach as well to make sure that individuals know they could come in and receive the vaccine at Broomfield Public Health, and we have an amazing team to work with them.
Thank you. Next is Board Member Marsh-Holshan.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment in that, you know, to be honest with you, when I heard that the mask mandate was going to be lifted for schools, I was concerned. I have two small children. In fact, I'm home tonight because both of them have tested positive for COVID. My daughter is in elementary school. My son goes to Balswan. And so I was a bit concerned, but I do understand what you're saying regarding the science. But the question I have is, what is the downside in leaving the mask in place for the schools? I guess that's the question I've heard from several people. Like, I understand that the numbers are going in the positive direction, but why not just leave it in place longer? I guess is the question that I have. So, thank you.
It's an excellent question, Councilmember Marsh-Holshan. You know, we hear often from residents on the mask issue from both sides. And we truly try to go back to the data as far as what drives our decisions, not what people feel about this. When we looked at the data, when we were looking at severity, specifically within that 0 to 4 population, and even when we're looking at with Omicron and in our 5 to 11-year-old population, we're not seeing greater severity in that group. So when you talk about leaving the mask order in place, we could have left it in place for another month, but then it was going to be, is it another month after that and another month after that? And as we had a discussion, and this was an intense discussion as a public health directors, and there's been multiple public health directors that have either had their agencies dismantled over these mask decisions, or have also, we just had another one lose their job in Jefferson County yesterday because of it, and it's a very politically divisive issue, which I just can't understand. As we started to talk about that, it became a question of, at what point do we keep mandating that you have to do these orders? And then secondly, the most important, the follow-up to that is if you're mandating it through a public health order, the intent of that behind the statute and the law is you're enforcing it. And so we would be out enforcing continually with that versus the statement that we need people to continue to wear masks in school. So as we deliberated that on top of what we were hearing from the school districts, that led to our decision.
Is that all? Board Member Marshall?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other board member questions? Board Member Anderson?
Thank you. I do have one question, and I have kids in Adams 12 school district. So this is the email that came home to us. And previously, if a student in their class, I get these on a continuous basis for multiple kids, and it says like your student was exposed, but because they have masks on, they don't have to quarantine. The new rules, I think, which is confusing, is the quarantine exemptions if they're fully vaccinated with the booster shot. That's one, and I can put that in writing to the school. The second was having had COVID and having recovered within the past 90 days. The third one is if not fully vaccinated, students must test negative for COVID-19 on the day of the exposure notification to continue attending school. So it's just like one negative test and then you're done. But I think where the confusion there is that it's usually, it can be days later that you actually test positive. So I'm just curious if there's a reason why you want to test the one time and we see that exemption.
Yeah, so we've talked to the schools a lot about the isolation and quarantine guidelines that are within schools. And one thing that we do know is kids are no different than adults when we're talking about those isolation and quarantine recommendations and guidelines. Our medical officer, Dr. Bob Belknap, is one of the leading experts in infectious disease control in the state and has pointed that out to me numerous times. So then it goes into the question of, okay, an individual tests positive, but they may not be symptomatic. So at what point do they start isolating? Well, if they test positive and then develop symptoms after that and still have those symptoms, the recommendation is to continue to stay home until you're symptom free. We are also aware though that after that 5-day period and you know your symptoms are improving, you can come back, and we're telling the schools they still have to have those students wearing masks if they've been out, tested positive, and they're coming back. With quarantines, similar sort of guidance when it comes to following those recommendations. And one thing that I'll just be honest with this group, we're looking much more closely at as a metro region and having conversations with CDPHE because they're still following the CDC guidances. What's the effectiveness of contact tracing and quarantines in schools when we're getting to this point? Because we knew before when we were able to identify, isolate, and quarantine, there was a key role that it was playing. Now we're moving to a point where that sometimes if we're having a whole classroom or cohort out on quarantine, we're potentially doing more damage to the students because of missing school, educational attainment, ability to get, food security. A lot of factors are coming into play. So as we're looking again at the severity of the current disease and where we're at, those are all discussions we're reanalyzing to say, is it the old playbook, or do we need to start looking at a new playbook that starts to treat this more as a respiratory disease within a school setting?
Thank you. Councilmember Ward. Board member 2.
Thank you, Mayor. My only question is in regards to the vaccination rates. Do those vaccination rates account for people who, let's say, moved from another state and were fully vaccinated or had some level of vaccination from another state, or residents that may have traveled and for some reason decided to get the vaccine where they traveled?
Yeah.
Or do we not have a method of capturing that data?
It's an excellent question, and I don't have the answer to that. So let me go back and make sure that I give you an accurate answer.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other board member questions? Well, thank you very much. I think this is the best update yet, and I think it's the first meeting that I haven't had to wear a mask. So thank you. Seeing there is no further business before the Board of Health, the meeting is adjourned. Next is council business, and earlier this evening, Councilmember Marshall requested that item 7B be moved to the council business. We will review this item now before we continue with item 11A. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Kimberly Dahl, Director of Public Works. Going to give a brief introduction and run through, and then we'll move pretty quickly to the questions for Councilmember Marsh-Olson, who I know Ms. Dahl has been in contact with over the last week on the EV charging stations and electric vehicles. Ms. Dahl.
Thanks, Hugh, City and Council, or City and County Manager Hoffman. I also have with me my fleet superintendent, sorry, I didn't know where he disappeared to, Sven Eagle-Sizer, who's a critical part of our fleet operations. So next slide, please. So our fleet division within Public Works is responsible for the repair and maintenance of all vehicles and equipment in the city. Currently, we have approximately 535 units that they maintain. In addition to that repair and maintenance, they also handle the procurement of new vehicles and replacements of any vehicles that have been deemed necessary or recommended for replacement. When we have specifications for the replacement, we do have a process that we follow for this. We use outside resources such as Clean Cities. We meet with our sustainability groups. We make sure that the specifications for whatever vehicle is proposed to be purchased meets our customers' needs, as well as any city and county policies that have been presented. So again, Public Works Fleet works with our sustainability team specifically to evaluate electric or alternative fuel vehicle options. Electric isn't the only option for us. We evaluate whether the electric or alternative vehicle meets our specifications in order to best support the needs of our customers, which is our city and county employees. And this is in an effort to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in alignment with goals that have been adopted by City Council with our sustainability plan. Next slide, please. So in 2022, the units in front of you tonight are heavy equipment replacements that are requested. One of them is a tandem axle dump truck with snow and ice equipment for our fleet or our streets division. The next that you see there is a front end loader that's primarily used by our utilities group. And then 2 senior service buses that are with our parks, recreation, and senior services team. Next slide, please. The tandem axle dump truck is recommended for replacement. It's 13 years old and it has approximately 160,000 miles of runtime.
Currently, there is no electric option that meets our specifications. Our plows, when deployed, operate 24 hours a day, and there's really no charging time available. If there were equipment that could meet those needs, right now we don't have equipment that meets the needs, but even if there were, we would have to expand our fleet to make sure that we could have replacements while those other vehicles charge. Consistent with our purchasing policy of the Broomfield Municipal Code, Chapter 3-20, if a procurement process meets or exceeds Broomfield's process, we're allowed to use cooperative purchasing for those purchases. Sourcewell is one that does meet or exceed our procurement processes, and McCandless Truck Center has been their selected vendor for this type of truck equipment. So that is one proposal. The utilities front end loader is proposed for replacement. It's 20 years old. The life expectancy on these vehicles is closer to 15. It's a little embarrassing to say, but this vehicle is rusted out so much so that it no longer has a structural floor. It no longer has storage compartments and even window frames for that matter. So this poor thing is not very pretty. Similar to, well, and just to take a side note on these heavy duty vehicles, there's a research firm called IHS Markit that projects that diesel will remain the primary fuel of approximately 2/3 of new medium and heavy duty trucks sold, predicted to be equipped by diesel only or diesel hybrid powertrains in 2040. So that's an independent research firm that it has identified based on current technologies, what we're forecasting. This is going to be a little bit long haul. The good news is that battery electric vehicles, specifically for the medium duty trucks, such as the senior services buses that I'm about to talk about, are expected to experience a 15% growth rate through 2040. The technology just right now, it's advancing, but it's not quite there yet. And I would like to also point out CDOT's Fleet and Equipment Asset Manager has stated to the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, otherwise known as AASHTO, diesel engines are built to do heavy work over long periods of time, with their low end torque making trucks equipped with diesel powertrains more conducive to pushing snow, hauling rock, and other duties associated with public works. So that's just some of the challenges faced with some of our heavier duty equipment. Next slide, please. So the senior service buses, these kind of fall into that medium duty range. A little bit of background on this. In 2021 alone, the 8 buses that serve that provide the service within the community average about 10 people a day, which is at least 20 trips. That's one there, one back, every day. And so once the bus starts going on its route, it really doesn't stop until the day is over. The vehicles are being proposed for replacement because both are approximately at or over 100,000 miles, which is one of our criteria for replacement. There is a significant lead time with these buses once they are ordered in the range of 12 to 18 months. And we're starting to see an increase in ridership. So following the good news that Director Balling has provided, we're starting to see an increase in ridership for those individuals with disabilities that are not covered under our grant funding. So our current vehicles are running at an average of 100+ miles per day, and that's only anticipated to increase. So we did look at electric vehicles for this because there are some electric vehicle options, especially in the large transit vehicles. There's some electric options. Staff even attended a 2-day class presented by the Colorado Association of Transit Agencies, or CASHTA. And issues with the electric vehicles currently relate to the charge time related to getting them back up to service. Right now, that's estimated about 12 hours. And the distance the vehicle can charge before or travel before recharging. So Senior Services tested out a bus that was expected to meet expectations. It had a projected range of 150 miles under ideal conditions. And ideal conditions means no running the AC, no running the heater, level terrain, not much stop and go, kind of constant speed, cruising down the highway. And that's just not consistent with the operations of what we do. There's a lot of stop and go. There's a lot of, back and forth. And what they found after trying it out is that the range was reduced by about half to approximately 60 miles, which just does not meet the needs. And I would hate to have our bus just kind of off to the side with a senior or anybody ready relying on us, because that's not the service that we're looking to provide. So what we did end up finding, and we did look at another bus, similar things were found as far as not being there. So the technology is coming, but right now, while we're in need of replacement, it's just not there yet. So what we're proposing is 2 buses that do have reduced emissions compared to our existing vehicles. And those would be from Creative Bus Sales off of the New Mexico state bid, which again also meets the procurement standards, and also the buses meet the specifications for our uses. Next slide, please. So before you tonight, I have 3 resolutions. One for the tandem axle truck with McCandless Truck Center, one for the front end loader with Wagner Equipment, and one for the 2 senior service buses with Creative Bus Solutions. And with that, I would entertain any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Dahl. We'll start with public comments. Does any member of the public have any comments on this agenda item? If so, please step up to the podium. And I don't see any online. So let's move on to questions from council. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against is later. Councilmember Ward, you had your hand up first.
Thank you, Mayor. So all of my questions are going to be directed just towards the senior service buses, because coming from the transit industry, recognize that there are many difficulties and not as much technology or money put into developing the technology for the heavy duty truck and the front end loaders. So my question is with regard to the senior service vehicles. How long roughly do we usually keep those vehicles?
So it really is based on age, mileage, and repair costs. So given the mileage range, I know that we need that. Sven, can you speak to the age of the buses right now? 7 years is what we look to hold on to those buses for.
Okay, and you said we have 8 vehicles currently.
We do.
Know roughly when those other 6 will need, or sorry, 5 will need to be replaced?
Sven, Evil Sizer, Police Superintendent.
I'm glad to answer that. So like I said, we're kind of behind, especially due to the microchip shortage. So the buses take that long to build out. I would say probably the next few years, as technology progresses, we'll probably be looking at anywhere from 1 to 2 every year moving forward to get us back up to speed to where we need to be.
Okay. Do you foresee any expansion in the number of vehicles needed because of the possible projected increase in ridership?
I'm going to defer to Play Shop.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and Clay Shep, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Senior Services. Thank you, Councilman Ward, for that question. We actually saw during the COVID a drop off of ridership and an increase in mileage, which is kind of interesting. The increase in mileage was actually due to how doctors a lot of times were running their services, where they weren't doing it in multiple locations, they were doing it in one location. So we were traveling, which we weren't doing prior to COVID. We were now traveling outside of our boundaries to make a lot of those medical trips. We are seeing ridership go back up. So along with ridership going on back up, we're also seeing an increase in individuals that have disabilities that don't fall under our grant-funded ridership. They're getting more and more requests for rides for different things. So we do see that our ridership is going up. Along with that, I just want to point out, for those of you that were on council a couple of years ago when we placed up us, we do not have a backup right now. So we're currently running the buses that we have at full capacity with no backup whatsoever. So we probably are looking at some increase in ridership that we can probably handle within the next 2 to 3 years. And if we start to see growth at that point in time, we would definitely need to look at an additional bus and a backup vehicle.
Okay, thank you. And then, one of my last questions is going to be, was the significant upfront costs of the charging infrastructure something that also played a factor in this decision?
We have, as I look through my notes here, a 5-year sustainability plan that we have, and I emphasize the word plan, that we created with our sustainability team. And I would say that no, that did not have an impact on that. One thing I neglected to mention during my presentation that I would like to highlight, that of the 25 vehicles proposed for replacement in 2022, 18 of those are hybrids and 4 of those are going to be electric. And when we choose where we're putting those electric vehicles, the charging infrastructure is part of that conversation to make sure that wherever those vehicles live have a place to charge.
Okay, perfect. The only reason I have these comments is because the lifespan of these vehicles is relatively short for the type of work they do, and with the rate of increase in technology for battery storage, I do not foresee this being quite as much of an issue, and I'm very happy to grant this request.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilmember Marshall-Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation and the information you provided both tonight and also in the email. I definitely understand that the technology is not there for the snowplow and the front loader. My question is on the buses still. You said, what are these buses specifically being used for? Are they long distance trips? Are they short around town? And is there any time during the day that they're sitting idle, I guess is the question.
So the buses are currently used Monday through Friday for a number of trips internally. So medical trips, nutrition trips, taking folks to the grocery store who don't have transportation to do that, in addition to Meals on Wheels, and take people to the recreation centers for that service. With that, we also have trips that we provide, and those trips are long distance trips, and they're extremely popular. So with the vehicles that we have, if they're all running at current capacity, that doesn't leave any room for error or for maintenance. And unfortunately, all these vehicles, as they start to get older, obviously require that maintenance. So we probably only average 7 vehicles on the road each day because we have 1 vehicle that's in or out. There is not much idle time during the day for these vehicles. They're not sitting around a whole lot. We do have a tracking system that we have on it where we can provide a little bit more data on that. But there's really not the time to take a bus out of service and still complete the current needs that we need to do every day with the trips that we have scheduled.
On these, thank you. On these, you mentioned the 12-hour charging time. Does that, and forgive me, I don't understand, I don't quite know the technology. I know for like an electric vehicle, car, you can buy charging stations that are high capacity, high speed charging. Does that also exist for a bus like this, so that if you had like an hour downtime in between trips or something, where it's, or if you took a trip up to the mountains or something, and you have a few hours before you come back down, would the technology exist that would be able to charge it more quickly in those downtimes?
So there's 3 different types of infrastructures for charging these buses. There's basically a type 1, which would be your home 110 volt outlet. There's a type 2, which is basically a 1-for-1. So every hour you run for, you can run for 1 hour versus charging. Then there's a level 3. It's quite a bit more expensive, but it's the one that can put the most voltage to the bus to charge it in the most minimal amount of time. It could be anywhere from roughly 4 to 5 hours for a full charge on this capacity bus. Another thing I wanted to mention too with these buses, we talk about optimum conditions. That's like 68 degrees. You're not running the heating, the air conditioning, things of that nature. But one of the biggest struggles with this platform as well is the handicap lifts. When you're running that lift up and down on every stop, it's pulling from the batteries as well. So that's another dynamic when you put it into the perspective of these platforms that you got to really take a look at. But, you know, my hopes are that it's going to be a lot closer in the next few years.
Okay, and then one final question on you said that we basically have we have no extra. We have the buses that we have that we need. Would we be able to engage more electric vehicles in this capacity if we had spares? I guess is the question. If we bought one or two extra for those uses.
When senior services examined what that might look like, it was determined that we would need 4 buses to replace the 2. And financially, these buses are not insignificant in cost. So from a financial perspective, it would be a challenge. It could be done, but it's just a matter of what cost. We would need approximately 2 backup buses so that, you know, if we're finding that the bus can make it about half a day, we need another bus to swap out for that other half a day while the other one charges.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. That's all I had.
Thank you. Are there any other council member questions on this item? Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So looking at the fact that in Broomfield we have a greenhouse gas emissions reduction goal, we also are looking at the climate change effects that are happening around us, and the need to move to an electric fleet is one of those. But also the other piece is operational changes. And I'm curious within both the fleets as well as senior services, have we started to look at some of those possible operational changes that can assist reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, as well as the ability to move to electric fleet?
Absolutely. I think switching the fuel is our primary gain, I guess, as far as a shift. Other things that we can look at are idle time. One of there's times where it's okay to idle, there's times where it's not. I would bring up our police department as a good reason to idle. They need to be ready to go. Their cars need to be, you know, ready to go. And so those likely wouldn't be a group that we would focus on as much for idle time, but maybe for some of our other operators, do you really need to have your car warm up for 25 minutes before you go out there? You know, things like that we can look at. But from a reduction perspective, switching to fuels is primarily the biggest move that we can make on the needle. There are, I would say, 2 facets to our approach on reducing greenhouse gases from a vehicular standpoint. One of them being our own internal activities, such as electrifying our fleet as much as possible, or reducing, you know, to the alternative fuels. Even swapping out for a newer diesel vehicle, even we're swapping a diesel for a diesel. By the time we get to the age, the technology is advanced enough, you know, 7 to 10 years, that the emissions are significantly reduced from what they were. So maintaining that replacement schedule rather than retaining old vehicles really helps out. And then the other thing I would say is reducing our low use vehicles, so that, again, those are the vehicles that tend to hang around longer and have, because they're older, not be as safe, not as be as environmentally friendly. And then the third thing I would want to look at is look at the high, what I call the high offenders. So like golf carts are notorious. Gasoline powered golf carts are notorious for being great emitters of greenhouse gases. So if we can electrify those are things that we want to accelerate to make sure that we are doing what we can as a city and county to achieve our goals.
When you talk about switching the primary fuel usage, that's diesel, gasoline, electric. I mean, that's across the gamut, right? The fuel, in, you know, quotes, needed to power the vehicle. So
yes, the goal would be zero emission.
Excellent. So Longmont has moved towards, I mean, they've called it renewable natural gas, but we're talking about recaptured methane. Is that a possibility for Broomfield moving into that sphere, or is this something that we're kind of prohibited from?
That is something that we're actually looking into. I would say we're in a conceptual phase right now. Later in the coming months, I will propose to bring a utilities wastewater master plan to city council. What that will do is map out what the next 20 years looks like as far as our community and what our wastewater treatment plant will need. Once we can identify that, we can zero in a little bit better on what that methane capture looks like. As it stands right now with current projections, it doesn't look like it would benefit us from a fleet standpoint, but we could sell that potentially back to Excel. There's a lot of what ifs that go with that because that would be an enterprise fund that would be making sure that we don't violate any financial rules. So there's a lot of moving pieces with that, but it is something that we are currently considering with our sustainability group.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? Well, I just have to tell you that the Easy Ride service has been a lifesaver for my family. My 94-year-old mother-in-law uses it several times a week, and she does need the ramp. She uses a walker, and that door-to-door service is so valuable to so many of our citizens that can't drive. And knowing that we only have just enough and there's no backup, and they're a year out, I think the remedy is obvious to me that we need to get these. Otherwise, we'll be sidelining our seniors. So thank you very much for the thorough answers and questions from the board. Next is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2022-07. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution 2022-07 by title?
Resolution number 2022-07, authorizing and approving the purchase of 2 replacement senior service buses.
Is there a motion? Councilmember Leslie.
I'll move the motion, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mayor Pro Tem?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Councilmember Lim?
I just wanted to comment that I appreciated that Public Works has been participating in the ACES subcommittee meetings. They have been there extensively. And council will see when the greenhouse gas recommendations come forward from ACES, and I think currently scheduled for April, that fleet electrification is an important part of that that's being planned. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Marsh-Holston.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I asked for this to be off the consent agenda, mainly because I feel like this is something that has been talked about for a very long time. And I know that I'm, new on council, and you guys have been working on this for a very long time, and staff is doing a great job on this. But it's one of those issues that I felt like it's great to talk about, but it's something that we need to do and just implement. But I appreciate staff's thorough explanation of the technology and what we need and what we have. So while I do believe that we need to move forward with fleet replacement for electric, I do understand that these vehicles may not be the best ones at this time. So I intend to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you. I just wanted to again repeat, I guess, what Councilmember Marsh-Holston said, that I think we need a strategy moving forward to get the fleet electrification started. I noted that New York City just bought 200 electric SUVs for their police. Other communities are buying electric e-transits. And so there's a path to follow. And I think there's also, I didn't hear it in the discussion, but the sound isn't great, that there is gas savings as well that you can calculate into the cost of replacing these vehicles. So I recognize now is a bad time to talk about EV due to the chip shortage. I think electric vehicles take twice as many chips as the typical vehicle. So, and with the shortage, it's bad timing. But so I will support this now, but I do believe we need to create a strategy going forward, as Councilmember Marsh-Holston is calling for.
Thank you. I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Hoffman.
We agree with the strategy. The preliminary, more than preliminary, I would say maybe a quarter of the way on what the implementation could look like. It's all about the funding. So the timing is right, coming back with the greenhouse gases in April, because that's when we're going to be coming back with our first budget amendment. Again, there's a finite pot of money. Revenues are flat. We have platinum level service levels, much higher, and Mayor, from a staff perspective, your comment today on the snow plowing is, not only is it appreciated, but again, from that clarity perspective of what the expectations are and the dollars that are attached to those expectations. So we too would like to electric our entire fleet, without a doubt. You have a lot of folks that are pretty excited about that opportunity. And we need to be mindful as we move forward, particularly the next 3 years. So again, we'll have a lot more conversations with council, budget kind of 401, right? Because we've been through all those preliminary, when we have the council focus session. That's a really significant part of that focus session is finance. And then when we come in April with that budget amendment. So a lot of the conversations are now having to be tied back to the correlative perspective of all the more reason to have that strategic plan and understand what the costs are.
Thank you very much. Will the clerk please call the roll? Oh wait, there's more discussion? I'm sorry. You want to go again?
I just have a
Sure.
question. I just wanted to make sure, just before the roll was called, that this is just for resolution number 2022-07 for the replacement for the 2 senior service buses. Is that correct?
No, the first one I believe is the buses are first. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that clarification.
Thanks. Thought they were in opposite order. All right, ready?
Mayor,
Yeah.
they could be grouped together if council would like to do it that way also.
Any objections to that? Councilmember Stroud.
Yeah, I would say that based upon the comments that we've had, we could consider these separately, and that way we can get support for at least 2 of these unanimously. Maybe the 3rd one, I'm not quite sure where the votes are going to go, but if we can consider these separately, I would appreciate that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second for resolution 2022-07. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jaworski.
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Lindsted,
Yes.
Marshall,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution number 2022-08 by title?
Resolution number 2022-08, authorizing and approving the purchase of a tandem axle dump truck with snow and ice equipment.
Is there a motion? Councilmember Schaaf?
So moved.
Is there a second? Councilmember Ward?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Jaworski.
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Lindsted,
Yes.
Marshall,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hinkle.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Last is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2022-09. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution number 2022-09 by title?
Resolution number 2022-09, authorizing and approving the purchase of 1 front end loader.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Ward.
So moved.
Is there a second? Councilmember Schaaf.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Lindsted,
Yes.
Marshall,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jaworski.
Yes.
Awesome. That passes unanimously too. Thank you both for being here and for answering all the questions. You worked hard for that.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your support.
We'll now continue with the agenda as originally posted. The first item under council business this evening is the public hearing and council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2021-21 regarding a residential development from Fairfield Residential. I'll convene the Urban Renewal Authority. I will call they'll call the meeting of the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority to order. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll for the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority.
Anderson. Cohen.
Here.
Hinkle. Here. Dezersky.
Here.
Leslie.
Here.
Lim. Here. Lindsted.
Here.
Marshall.
Here.
Mitchell. Here. Nielsen. Schaff.
Here.
Ward.
Here.
Did you say Director Mitchell? Okay, good. Well, then a quorum is present. I'll now declare the public hearing open. We will follow the city's standard public hearing procedures. First, staff will present a summary of the proposal. Next, we'll have the applicant's presentation if applicable. Then we'll ask for public comments and final comments from the applicant, and finally, questions from the city council members. Council and the borough board members have a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. Anna Bertzetti, Co-Director of Community Development, will walk us through this brief presentation. Ms. Bertzetti.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members, and board members. Anna Bertzetti, Planning Director and Co-Director for Community Development. We can have the next slide, please. So Fairfield Residential has submitted this application. It has multiple parts. There's urban renewal site plan, a site development plan, and a final plat. In total, it will have 387 residential units, an apartment complex on about 12.59 acres of property within the Arista development. The site is located west of US 36 and north of Transit Way, so it's just north of the parking garage. The property is zoned PUD, planned unit development, and is located within the Broomfield Urban Transit Village PUD. Multifamily residential, including apartments, is a permitted use in this portion of the PUD area. Next slide, please. The property is designated as transit-oriented development in Brookfield's comprehensive plan land use map. This proposal is consistent with that land use designation, and the long-range financial plan is based on that land use designation, so it's also consistent with the long-range financial plan. Next slide, please. This rendering is showing the proposed development. As I mentioned, 387 residential units. There are 14 total buildings, a clubhouse, and carports as well. The apartment buildings are about 3 stories in height and approximately 40 feet. The amenities included with this complex will include a cornhole area, dog park, pickleball court, an outdoor pool and clubhouse, community gathering areas for like picnics and barbecues, a bicycle repair station, and a community garden. The complex will have 2 ingress-egress points from Transit Way. Parking for tenants and guests is offered via attached garages, the carports, as I mentioned, and also surface parking. There's 13 EV-ready charging stations included with this proposal. Most of the parking lots are interior to the site, with the building screening the parking from the adjacent properties and streets. The proposal does include an on-site parking ratio of 1.64 spaces per unit. Given the location of this apartment complex, it's very close to the TOD area of Arista. It has easy access to the RTD bus rapid transit station and the overflow parking area for Arista. Staff believe that this parking ratio is adequate in the context of this overall neighborhood. So it has been reviewed by transportation and traffic staff. A plat is requested along with the site development plan. This combines the lots into the developable parcel, and it also dedicates necessary easements to serve the development. Although the Arista PUD included language that exempts future residential developments like this one from changes in code requiring affordable housing, this developer has chosen to contribute $378,286.88, which will go to Broomfield's housing fund because this developer recognizes the need for affordable housing resources in Broomfield. Similarly, there's no additional public land dedication required for this project. That's because Arista did an overall public land dedication requirement, and over 22 acres has already been developed within Arista. Gallery Park will be developed with the Steadfast Apartments, so that's the last remaining segment. Next slide, please. The architectural style of the buildings shown here demonstrates the very the flat roofs, the lines with the parapets. HVAC systems in this case are on the top of the roofs, but they're set inside wells and will be fully screened by the parapets. There are tuck under garages as shown at the rear of the buildings, and the color scale and materials are intended to help give the complex an urban upscale feel. So it's consistent with the rest of the Arista area in context. Next slide, please. As discussed in the staff report in much more detail, the original subdivision plat dedicated an overflow parking and access easement in this area. The parking and access easement provided for a event center with access for overflow event parking. Overflow parking will remain on the CDOT property to the east of this site, and the developer has agreed to provide an access easement across the site from Transit Way to the CDOT property. This area is shown on the screen circled in red, and the area of the easement is further defined in yellow. The Broomfield Police Department will be on site to help direct traffic to the overflow area during events at First Bank Center. Disclosures about this overflow parking will be provided to tenants when they enter into a lease. Next slide, please. The applicant is requesting 2 variances with this request. The first is that the PUD doesn't allow building identification signs or marquee signs. It really doesn't address them, I should say. It's not an address sign classification under the residential sign options for this area. The applicant is proposing a marquee sign for the leasing and mailroom entrances of the clubhouse and leasing area. Per the variance requested that is listed on the site plan, all signs will consist of individual letters affixed to the top of the canopy with a maximum area of 22 square feet. And this type of sign is intended to add interest and also calls attention to these important services. The plan also calls for an internal backlit monument sign, which is not listed, a listed illumination type in the PUD. The applicant has indicated that this backlighting requires less maintenance. The proposed signage types and backlighting of the monument sign were reviewed and approved by the Architectural Control Committee for Arista. These variances to permit the signage are consistent with the urban aesthetic of the intent of this PUD. Next slide, please. On December 13th of 2021, the Land Use Review Commission reviewed this proposal and recommended approval by a vote of 4-1. The applicant also had held a neighborhood meeting on March 18th of 2021, where consultants reviewed the proposal with the planning staff present and 2 property owners. And the guests noted their appreciation for having a neighborhood meeting and the opportunity to review the plans. Staff has not identified any key issues with that proposal. And that concludes staff's presentation. As was mentioned, the applicant is also here this evening and has a presentation for you as well.
Thank you, Ms. Bernzetti. Next is the applicant presentation. Just as we ask our staff to keep their presentations brief, I ask the applicant to be concise in their presentation. Will the applicant's representative please identify themselves for the record prior to beginning their brief presentation this evening?
Yes, hi, Council, Mayor. My name is Lee Busey. I'm with the applicant, Fairfield Residential. We can flip to the next slide. We're going to keep our comments pretty brief here. So before we get started, I just want to share a little bit about Fairfield Residential. We are a residential multifamily developer, operator, owner of apartments nationally. We are headquartered in San Diego, California, and we have a regional office here in Denver, Colorado. We've been in business for 36 years. And one thing that really distinguishes us is we're very proud of our ownership. We are majority owned by the California State Teachers Retirement System. It's a pension fund, and all teachers' pensions go into investing in our communities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leanne from Norse Design to talk a little bit more about our project.
Good evening. Leanne Blair with Norse Design, 1101 Bannock Street, Denver, Colorado. Thank you very much, Anna, for your thorough presentation. We're very excited to be here tonight to discuss this project in this community. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder, our site is located on 12.5 acres just north of the existing Arista parking garage and east of Uptown Park. Next slide, please. The proposed site plan is organized around a north-south Main Street that is intended to be an extension of Colony Road to the south and to mimic the existing character of Arista. And the community is broken into neighborhoods. This helps create a more walkable scale and avoid large parking fields. The building orientation also helps to screen the parking and keep all parking internal and help activate the street as well. Leasing center and clubhouse amenities are located at the intersection of Transit Way and Colony Row. And almost 60% of our on-site parking spaces are covered either in garages or carports. Outdoor bike racks are located throughout the community, and bike racks will also be provided inside the garages as well. And then lastly, we are providing a connection to Uptown Park to the west there to have that direct connection for residents for that walking trail. Next slide, please. A little bit more in detail of our site amenities spread throughout the community. Enlargement area number 1 shows the dog park, and that has the the dog wash and bike repair building. And that's located in the northernmost corner of the project. Just south across the drive aisle is a gaming area that includes a bocce court, cornhole, and shade structures. Enlargement area number 2 features the gathering area that has farm to table style seating, outdoor grills, an outdoor fireplace, and pergola. And just southeast of that is the community garden, which includes additional seating and tool sheds. Enlargement area number 3 is the leasing and club center, or clubhouse rather. The indoor amenities include community room, game room, the fitness area, workspaces, and indoor mailroom. Where outdoor spaces include the pool and spa, lounge seating, cabana seating, outdoor kitchen with dining areas, and fire pit and gaming areas. And lastly, enlargement number 4 shows the pickleball court and plaza space for future art located in the southeast corner of the community. Next slide, please. So sustainability is very important to Fairfield, and this site, as mentioned, includes 13 EV charging stations located throughout the community, and those are spread both across surface parking and garage parking. In addition, conduit and wiring will be put in place for the future expansion of the EV capabilities for both garage and surface parking. The community also utilizes energy and water efficient appliances and fixtures. Conduit for future solar panels will be installed to the roof. Promoting ridership will be a focus for this community, given its location to the RTD bus station, and that will be a focus in the clubhouse. And lastly, the landscape has been designed to minimize the high water use turf areas, utilizes drought tolerant plant material, as well as moisture sensing irrigation technologies. Next slide, please. So sustainability isn't unique just to Fairfield's Broomfield projects. They have a commitment to maintaining green communities with their Living Green initiative. And this is a multifaceted approach that includes small decisions like printing on recycled paper, providing water bottle refill stations, using eco-friendly cleaning products and fertilizers, and offering reusable tote bags to residents. And then the larger decisions include environmentally responsible building materials, energy efficient appliances, and communities such as this one within close proximity to transit. Next slide, please. This rendering before you is of the leasing and clubhouse building, as shown the blow up that Anna shared. During our concept review hearing on March 30th of last year, we heard a couple concerns and recommendations from members of the commission and the city council. There were concerns that the building facades facing US 36 would be unattractive. Those buildings along the highway have been revised to have the front facades facing US 36, and an image coming up will illustrate those facades. In addition, all the buildings include four-sided architecture. Additionally, there was a concern about noise generated from US 36 and the airport. An acoustic study was conducted and architectural materials have been chosen to address the highway noise. The study also found no significant impact from the airport beyond the measures already being taken. Current concerns over parking were expressed. The current site plan before you today has an additional 15 spaces from the previous plan. And then lastly, at a suggestion of a former council member to diversify our amenities for the residents, the pickleball court was added to the amenity spaces. Next slide, please. This is the image of the view of the buildings. Sorry, did we skip one? Okay, there we go. Thank you. So this is an image of the buildings along Transit Way. And as Anna mentioned, the architectural style is intended to be distinct yet complementary to the existing buildings within Arista, with the varied roof lines and massing that helps provide that kind of variation among the building types. Next slide, please. So this is a view of the buildings visible from US 36. Next slide, please. We thank you for your time this evening. Our team is here for any questions, and that concludes the applicant presentation.
Thank you very much. We'll now proceed with public comments. Does any member of the public have comments on this agenda item? We'll start with in-person, and if so, please come to the podium. State your name and neighborhood for the record. I'm not seeing any. I was going to invite Director Mitchell to come sit up here. We have some spare chairs at the dais. No, you don't have to vote in the back of the room. It's better for the record too. Thank you. Pulling double, triple duty. All right, so questions from City Council and the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority are next. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments for or against is later. Are there any questions from Council and Borough? Councilmember Ward. Borough member.
Thank you, Mayor. My first question is going to go to, or is going to regard the use or future use of solar and other renewable energy sources. Why are you guys not doing that right up front on the initial build instead of punting it down the road when we need it now?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So we are very kind of selective in the items that we can do right away. And there are other items that as the technology becomes more available. So for example, the ones that we implement right away are the EV charging stations. But ones like the solar panels, at the current time, it's a little bit cost prohibitive to do that on our project.
Why?
Well, we've gone through and we've talked to Excel, but from an overall hard cost construction cost standpoint, it doesn't make sense from overall dollars and cents.
Okay. And with regard to the EV charging, why only 13 spaces at this present time when we want to be facilitating the transition from gasoline and diesel power over to electric?
Sure.
It's not going to cut it.
Sure. So we are pre-wiring the garages for future use. So the actual garages, residents can elect to put chargers in the actual garages if they have vehicles that need to be charged. But at the current time, we're putting stations that we feel accommodate the current uses in the community.
So in your opinion, do you view EV charging as a luxury or a necessity?
100%, I think the world is going in the direction of EV charging. What we've seen in our community so far is that there are EV charging vehicles, and there's also still vehicles that are using gas. And at the current time, we think 13 spaces is enough for the current use.
I would like you to reconsider that, in all honesty. My next question is going to be in regards to bike parking. It was 59, was that correct?
What was it right now? 51?
We currently have 52 exterior bike spaces, an additional 123 interior.
Okay. I would like to see more bike parking, especially since this is a transit-oriented development neighborhood. I don't think that 170 to 200 roughly pit spaces will be good enough for the number of residents who intend to participate to have the property. In terms of connections to the US 36 bikeway, I noticed that you were requested to do a study as to the feasibility of connecting directly to the US 36 bikeway. Will CDOT still using the property that is east of your property for overflow parking? Is that my understanding correct in that?
That is correct. Yes, that's our understanding.
And it was noted that it would be impractical to put a walkway through that parking lot to connect to US 36. Can you elaborate on that, please?
So just to clarify, we weren't asked to do a study for the bikeway connection. That wasn't asked of us. We were asked to provide an easement that provided overflow parking access to the CDOT property. There was discussion around a connection from our property to the CDOT property for additional bike connection. We did evaluate that, a couple things. There is a property, when you look on the map, between our property, which is the CDOT property, and the bike lane, and we don't have any control, nor were we given any information on if CDOT would grant any sort of easement to do that. Now, we have had a meeting with staff actually today where we talked about that, and we talked about the potential to use the actual access easement where we're granting over our property, where a bike connection could be made. But again, we don't have any control over the CDOT property and what happens there.
So just to be clear, did you guys contact CDOT at all?
No, we did not. We were not asked to do that.
Anna, did you want to add something?
Thank you, Councilmember Cohen. If I could just add a little bit, staff did meet with the developer earlier today because this has been an ongoing conversation about how can we make that connection happen from this property, because as the developer mentioned, they don't have the, it's not their property, CDOT's property. So there's a few things that have to still be worked out. At this point, I think the developer has been willing to work with us on not just doing the easement for the access to the overflow, which was absolutely critical to make sure that we had safe access for that overflow parking as well, but also to incorporate pedestrian access in that same location so it can also be used for bicycles and pedestrians when not in use, obviously at a peak time for the overflow parking. And then staff will be working with CDOT. We have good connections with CDOT and to be able to access that US 36 bikeway. But we're very pleased with the fact that the developer was continuing to work with us on granting that easement for the pedestrian and bicycles, as well as the overflow parking access.
Okay, and I'm just going to add my comment that I would like to see a connection to the US 36 bikeway. I think it'd be more convenient than having to go down all the way to the station and then go back up if you need to go to Boulder or Louisville or Interlochen, et cetera. And then my last question is going to be in regards to the amount of parking that is put in the community. It was noted that because of the agreements made during the Arrested development, that you do not have to comply with the Brookfield Municipal Code in regards to parking minimums. And I think the amount of parking you have there, especially for a transit-oriented development where you guys do in your presentation, you want people to use public transit, is far too much.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward. Any other Councilmember questions? Councilmember Leslie?
Yeah, just to follow up on previous questions. As the community develops, and I appreciated your comment earlier about your pride in your community. And if more bikers come and you have adequate racks and things, would you be adding those, or would it be up to the individuals or to the association or whatever to buy those things?
Sure. So to address that on multiple fronts. So we found in our communities, not only here in Colorado, but across the country, that there's a couple things that happen. So one, with these bike lockers, some people choose to use them, and some people, as we know, are very outdoor enthusiasts, have very expensive bikes, and choose not to use them. So we try to balance that and not just put an overabundance of lockers that don't end up getting used. The other thing that didn't come through in our presentation is in our individual apartment unit plans, we've oversized a bunch of our linen closets. I wouldn't really call them linen closets, more like coat closets that can be used for that function. So we do have bike storage within the units. Now I understand that means that if you live on the second or third floor, you're carrying your bike up, but we found that some residents that have very expensive bikes like to do that.
Yeah, I understand that. And I'm assuming there are elevators.
In this project, there are not elevators in the actual apartment buildings. There is one in the clubhouse building.
Okay, so when you say carry up, you mean carry up.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I'm not, so you could work with the community if there is a need for more lockers, or distribute the lockers to make sure that they're fully utilized, so that the residents don't have to buy new themselves. If they're going to put it on a wall in a closet,
yeah,
those are inexpensive. Just to buy a hook kind of a thing to do that. I understand that. Okay. Same thing with solar. If and I appreciate your point. I'm struggling with this. I have an electric vehicle, and I'd love to put solar on my roof, but right now, given my age, I can't see the ROI on it. But I'm wondering if there isn't more that could be done so that as you're setting the stage for it, but maybe 3 years from now, whatever, that would be something you would continue to look at and potentially install, or whether once you're gone, you're gone. That's kind of a long-term question that I'm asking here.
Sure. Yeah. So our buildings are wired for future solar. I think it's something we continue to study and evaluate if it makes sense, if it pencils. If it's something in the future that pencils, it's certainly something we can implement. Candidly, I think the way that we'll start to see it being implemented is it'll be in phases where it'll start with maybe the amenity buildings will be electrified by solar, and then it could potentially in the future gain widespread acceptance. But when you look around today, in many of these new apartment communities, you don't see a lot of them that are fully solar.
I appreciate that. That's why I'm asking the question the way I am, because I'd like to know that you're going to stay connected to the project, to the community, and at the right time, be willing to install those things so that we can see this as part of a long-term strategy, not just to build it and we're gone, and it's up to somebody else to figure that out. What I'm hearing you saying is you're going to be staying involved.
Yeah, so we actually have a management company that also manages the communities that we build.
All right, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? Councilmember Lynn?
So I want to follow through with that with your interaction with the community on adding EV charging stations. So I agree with Councilmember Ward that 13 is too few for an upscale, large community that can't see its way even to put affordable housing in because it wants to be all market rate. So what, have you gone through any process at any other community where you have seen that the number of charging stations that you put in were not adequate and you responded to that need in the community and added them later?
Previously, we have not so much in Broomfield, but in other communities, we have put in actually less charging stations. The charging stations that are put in are stations that have dual ports on them. Previously on projects that we've done, we've put in 2 of them and dual ports and done 4 of them. And, I don't think we have the exact answer on how many are the right number. I think we continue to explore that as the EV automobile trend continues. So we do believe that we're going over and above the number that we expect, at least initially.
Okay, I will just comment. I feel a little split here from coming from 2 different places. I mean, we were just in the ACES Transportation Subcommittee meeting, and our own staff senior transportation planner said, we don't have the building code yet to hold developers to a certain percentage of EV charging stations, but he expressed that he thought it's really going to be in any developer's interest in Broomfield to make sure that they have adequate charging stations, just because those are the people that are moving to Broomfield are going to want to have that available to them to be able to choose, their vehicles. So that's where I'm coming from just having heard that in the subcommittee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Stroud, and then Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to follow up real quick on the charging infrastructure. So one of the things that we've done in the past is asked developers to put in at least the conduit for those future charging stations. And I'm wondering if this would be something that you would consider, just looking at, possibly, from the concept review, you talked about that all of the garages are equipped with charging infrastructure. And now there's going to be some in the non-garage charging infrastructure, but perhaps adding some conduit in the initial construction would then provide the ability to increase that charging infrastructure down the road and decrease the cost. So I'm wondering if that's something that you would consider, is adding that conduit now on the front end so that those charging infrastructures could go in down the road.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask my architect to come up really quick and just comment on the actual infrastructure that we're putting in, so we all have it right, exactly what we're doing. And then from there, we can talk about what other requests may be needed.
Yeah, so Kyle with AO Architects. So what we typically do is, when we call it providing a conduit ready, there are a couple of phases we could do it at. Either you have all the wiring ready but behind the wall and located, and then that's as far as you go. Or we actually put in the housing for the wiring to come out, and then put the actual charging on there.
I don't know which option is best, especially for changing technology down the road. But just to have that conduit in the ground as opposed to tearing up the parking lot at a later date seems like the better route to go. And I think that commitment to move that forward, I think it would go over well with this council.
So it just for clarification, is there a request for conduit? Is there a certain number in mind, or what is relative to the conduit? for the electric charging.
I think I mean, for me personally, I think the commitment to say, yes, we'll look into adding conduit into the parking lot to show that there's going to be a commitment to adding those charging stations later on, decreases the likelihood that we'll say, we just can't do that in terms of, cost down the road, but it makes that commitment to say, yes, we will do this down the road.
Okay, absolutely. So we are putting in the 13 stations. We are wiring and putting in the conduit to the garages. And then on top of that, if the request is that we put in conduit for additional surface spaces, we're happy to do that.
Anything else, Councilmember Shaw?
I'm sorry, man. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, next is Councilmember Anderson.
Okay, so as long as on the subject of EV charging stations, I have one more specific question, because maybe I was thinking about a previous development, but one of the previous developers, they actually asked this question, and they didn't just, you said wiring and putting in conduit to the garages, but they actually installed the 220 in the garage, which then allows, I believe, and it's like less than $500. You can put in your level 2 charger and plug it right into the 220. But if you need to have that final wiring done, I've seen quotes, like from neighbors trying to do this, it's about $1,000 sometimes just to for the electrician services to get that 220 put in the garage. So I guess I would implore you to actually put the 220 volt hook up right, like an outlet right into the garage, and not just the conduit. That'll save the future homeowners some effort and money.
That is our intent for the garages. So just to clarify, for the actual garages to the apartment community, they are going to be wired. The conduit will be in, they will be wired so that somebody can show up, purchase the charger, mount it on the wall for the actual garages.
And just plug it right in. Yes. Without having an electrician. Thank you. That's very helpful, because that quickly gets each of those EV owners that charging station. Thank you.
I'm going to Councilmember Lindstedt next. We're still doing first round, but I'll get back to Councilmember Leslie. Councilmember Lindstedt?
Thank you, Mayor. Real quickly, so could you just clarify ADA access to units? We were without elevators. Are all you? How does that work?
Yeah, so this is a 3-story project, so all the units above the above the ground floor are exempt, but all the ground floor units will be accessible.
Okay, so the upstairs units would not be, but the ground floor are, okay. And then I'll just make a real quick comment to my colleagues. It might be time for us to look at the building code and add some requirements for conduit and chargers so that developers and folks who are coming before us kind of know what to expect. So I think that might be an appropriate venue to address these types of things moving forward. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other council members first time or board members? Did you want to raise an issue?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Part of our questions, I think, are based on obviously desire to move in this direction. Appreciate your setting the stage for that. Part of my questions have been, answered already. You're going to be there. You're going to help do this. But just to clarify, in terms of external charges versus internal charges, how many are the garages? Single car garages? And does every unit have a single car garage?
Not every unit has a single car garage. We do have a certain number of garages. How many? We have 246 garages. Okay. And then we also have 13 outside external chargers.
Yeah.
In the surface.
Where I was going with this was that you may not actually need more external charges because enough people may be able to have access to a garage where the internal charger could be there, which is most preferable, frankly, for most people. But since most people have more than one car, you're going to need to have the external. So I understand your dilemma there, but I just want my council colleagues here to understand that the garage chargers would be a big part of any solution for those wanting to add an electric vehicle to their personal fleet.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other authority members? Go ahead, authority member Mitchell.
Good stuff, right? So I guess, being my first meeting in person, I know I was able to participate sometimes online, but I think there are new board members or council members since the last time I participated, and just giving a little background. It was legislated that URAs have a school board participant as part of the URA board, and that's the role that I serve. But there's only one school board member allowed per URA, but representing multiple school districts in our instance, because we have so many school districts that touch over our boundaries. And in that role tonight, I will be representing and speaking for Jeffco. And I wanted to thank the city staff for being very proactive and coordinating with the school districts and doing this on multiple occasions. And it seems that there's a relatively good process in place with the city and county to do that work up front. So when I get invited to the board meetings and we reach out to the district and say, did you know about this? Have you responded? And I did get, Jeffco was brought in. There's a letter back from Jeffco dated July 1st. They've done their analysis on the impact to their schools and the various levels using the prediction models that we're using in our school districts to project, how many students at what levels. So I do have that letter from Jeffco, and they have believed that there is no impact that they can't accommodate in their district. There is a note at the bottom of that letter, and I'm not exactly sure on what that terminology means, but I just wanted to make sure that that was entered in the record and noticed, where it talks about if required by the city and county of Broomfield, they would request fees in lieu of the developer, and that those fees would be held in escrow accounts for future applications. And I just want to make sure that that was noted as part of the approval process from Jeffco. And then just said at some point to follow up and just talk a little more. We're working on the school districts, because this is a relatively new role for school districts to play. We need to work on our coordination between our school districts, but also understanding how the city and county plays into that, and how I can know ahead of time and know what coordination is going on, just to make sure. So if we can do that at some future point, that would be great as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board members? Councilmember Ward?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one follow-up, maybe more questions in regards to the implementation of the EV charging. If I remember correctly, you did say residents could purchase their own and install it. Was that correct?
That is correct for in the garages, yes.
And this is a 100% renting community, correct?
Yes.
Do residents, when they leave those units and they've paid to install the charger, get reimbursed, or are they just supposed to bite the bullet?
They can take it with them. They can pull it out of the wall.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to say pull it out of the wall?
I think
unplug it. They can
so. Any last call for questions? Excellent. There being no further questions, the public hearing is closed. First is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2022-21. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution 2022-21 by title?
Resolution number 2022-21, authorizing and approving the Broomfield Urban Transit Village, filing number 11, replat B, lot 1, final plat and site development plan, urban renewal site plan, Fairfield, Arista.
Is there a motion, Councilmember Leslie?
Yeah, I'll move it. I just want to thank the team for responding to our multiple questions and your commitments for the future for this project. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Second, Councilmember Henkel.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you. I'm going to be really short in my discussion. I will agree to this tonight, and I think that I just really appreciate your time and preparation, and really having that forethought of, caring about our environment. And that this EV discussion, I think, is a policy discussion on Broomfield side, and with some sort of, guidance on a sort of a standard, just like we did with our affordable housing policy. And so I look forward to that coming out of Broomfield so that there's a set standard. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So I appreciate the movement that has happened in a lot of areas since our concept review. One of those was the airport noise mitigation and completing the sound study and ensuring that there's mitigation measures that are there to keep the residential units livable, as well as providing the disclosure that there is that noise that can be heard from the airport. Moving those front facades and making that gateway image along US 36, that is a big change from the concept review. So I appreciate that being done. We had talked a lot about in the concept review kind of commitments to multimodal transportation and increasing the number of bike facilities on the site, as well as providing those opportunities within the units or within the garages. Again, that's very much appreciated. And it sounds like there's going to be further conversations regarding connectivity around the area as well. So I appreciate those conversations continuing to move forward, because I think that not only helps the future residents in this development, but the residents in the surrounding area. Thanks for continuing to look into the charging infrastructure, laying that conduit in the early phases could potentially save you money on the back end, but also puts that possibility that that will happen in the future. And I think, like I said, I think that that goes a long way with council, but for sure it goes a long way with me. Let's see, the last thing that I wanted to say was your commitment to affordable housing in Broomfield. This is something that you didn't need to do according to our attorney as well as the PUD, but this is something that goes a long way for me in my support of this project, is that you will continue to commit to that. So I appreciate that. So I look forward to supporting this project tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank the developer for bringing this forward to council, even though I have multiple issues with the lack of EV charging and sustainability and trying to help Brookfield achieve our emissions goal and walkability goals. Councilmember Hinkle is right. This is more of a policy discussion, especially since I don't think it is clear that the developers can be trusted to bring this stuff forward as quickly as we would like from a policy standpoint. I will be voting in favor of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to echo some other comments that have been made previously. I will be supporting this project, and I appreciate the developer bringing it forward, and the quality that looks like it's going to be, and the number of residents that will be able to add to this area. That we obviously need housing in this area. I will echo the other comments, though, that I do think that there is a place for a policy discussion on electric charging, solar, a lot of various things that need to happen at an earlier stage of our development process. And I hope that's something that we can have moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Lim,
Yes.
Lindstedt,
Yes.
Marshall,
Yes.
Schaaf,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
Jezerski,
Yes.
Leslie.
Yes.
That passes unanimously. Did I miss someone? No, we're doing, this is the council one. You're in the next. So I thought I was right? Okay, you get to vote next time. Next is Brookfield Urban Renewal Authority's consideration of proposed resolution number 2022-UR. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution number 2022-22-UR by title?
Resolution number 2022-22 UR approving the Broomfield Urban Transit Village. Filing number 11, replat B, lot 1, urban renewal site plan.
Thank you. Is there a motion by an authority member? Authority member Mitchell?
So moved.
See, it was great that you're here. Is there a second? Councilmember Sapp?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Lindsted,
Yes.
Marshallson,
Yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Yes.
Chazarski,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Thank you all so much for entertaining the conversation. We do have some policy work to do. Have a good night. Our next, you know what? It's recess time. I forgot. So we're gonna take a 10-minute recess. It's 8:38. We'll be back in 10 minutes at 8:48. Thank you.
The Access Live event is in music hold. music hold ended.
Order of business on the agenda is the public hearing and council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2022-23, approving the Broadlands PUD text amendment to remove references to the Broadlands Golf Course Advisory Board. I'll now declare the public hearing open and will follow the city's standard public hearing procedures as previously outlined. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. Anna Bertanzetti will once again walk us through this item, although we do appreciate Councilmember Shafter the thought process of moving this to consent. From a staff perspective, we understand and received feedback that the notice that went out could have been interpreted as we were actually getting rid of the golf course. So we fielded some questions and concerns on that, so rest assured that that is not the case, nor will it be as we move forward in the future. Ms. Bertanzetti.
Thank you. And we made improvements to our notification on the second.
I got that.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, again this evening. Anna Bertanzetti, Planning Director and Co-Director for Community Development. We can have the next slide, please. So this proposal is an amendment to the Broomfield PUD plan, Planned Unit Development Plan, and the associated documents and agreements to remove all of the references to the Golf Course Advisory Board and replace it with references to the Parks, Recreation, and Senior Services Advisory Board. The Broadlands Golf Course Advisory Board has been dissolved in an effort to consolidate the number of boards and commissions for the city and county of Broomfield. Currently, the Golf Course Advisory Board role was to review public responses to the operations, the golf fees, and golf policies, as long as they did not change the provisions of the lease management agreement. This advisory role will be absorbed by the Parks, or has been absorbed by the Parks, Recreation, and Senior Services Advisory Committees, PRSAC. The proposed PUD text amendment does not include, as mentioned, any physical changes. There's no development proposed, and there's no land use changes. I think some of the confusion was having to use the term planned unit development is really, it sounds like there's development happening, but that is just the title of the document that we're changing. It's all a part of the master planned unit development plan for the Broadlands. So there's no development of the golf course, it is staying a golf course. The subject proposal does not include any variances from the municipal code, and there's no key issues identified by staff. Next slide, please. The Land Use Review Commission did review this proposal in January of this year and recommended approval with a vote of 6-0. Public notices have gone out. with improvements, and all requirements were met. And as I mentioned, there were no key issues identified by staff. There's no applicant presentation this evening since this was brought forward by staff.
Thank you so much, Ms. Burtonzetti. We'll now proceed with public comments. If any member of the public has any comments, please step up to the podium. Don't see any online. Questions from City Council are next. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against is later. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, next is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2022-23. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution number 2022-23 by title?
Resolution number 2022-23, authorizing and approving the Broadlands PUD text amendment to remove references to the Broadlands Golf Course Advisory Board.
Is there a motion? Councilmember Leslie?
Yes, I'll move it. I spoke with the gentleman who's the chair of the committee, and he told me he was supportive of this, so I'm supportive of it as well.
Awesome. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? No? Well, will the clerk please call the roll?
Marsh Holshin,
He's online.
Yes, yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
Jazersky,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Lindsted.
Yeah.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Our next item under council business this evening is the public hearing and council's consideration on second and final reading of proposed ordinance number 2172, amending certain sections of chapter 17 through 54 of the Broomfield Municipal Code regarding PFAS in oil and gas operations. I'll now declare the public hearing open. We'll follow the city's standard public hearing procedures as previously outlined. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mike Foote, outside counsel, special counsel on oil and gas, has prepared this item for council tonight and will handle the presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening, members of council. Mike Foote, special counsel for oil and gas matters, outside counsel. So this is a fairly straightforward item, and I'll be concise pursuant to your request earlier about being concise for presentations. It consists of one slide that gives you some background about this particular item. It's adding prohibition on the use of PFAS in oil and gas operations, along with the prohibition of the use of other types of chemicals that are already in the ordinance that you have in the oil and gas chapter. There's just a couple of things I wanted to highlight that aren't really on this slide, but I'll just add in addition to the slide. The most difficult part of this particular ordinance was coming up with the definition of PFAS. You'll see that the definition of PFAS is in the proposed ordinance. There's thousands of chemicals that come under the PFAS designation. I've seen anywhere from 4,500 to 10,000. I couldn't even tell you how many there are, but there's thousands. So how do you come up with a definition that covers it sufficiently? And the definition that you see in the proposed ordinance comes straight from the state of Colorado. In 2019, there was a bill that was passed by the General Assembly and signed by the governor that dealt with PFAS when it came to the use of firefighting foam and prohibited the use of PFAS in firefighting foam. That passed in Colorado. It used that particular definition. Subsequently, in a couple of other states, they've taken on some PFAS prohibitions. New York State passed an ordinance, or I should say a statute, in 2020 that dealt with prohibiting PFAS in food packaging. And Maine recently passed an ordinance that was more aggressive, but also banning PFAS by 2030 in many respects in that state. So they also use the same definition. It's the broadest definition that I've seen. It's broader than the federal definition that the EPA uses. So hopefully it would cover any kind of PFAS type of chemical that an oil and gas company would seek to use. The second thing that I'll mention is you may be wondering, at least for those of you that have seen it in the news or read the Physicians for Social Responsibility report about the use of PFAS in oil and gas development in Colorado that just came out, I guess, last week, and there was news about it. You may be asking what's the relevance of that, or if these two things kind of connect. It just turned out to be coincidental timing. but I think it shows the relevance of this particular ordinance and the fact that the PSR report found, in their opinion, that PFAS substances had been used in oil and gas drilling in the state of Colorado. They found that there was a large loophole when it comes to disclosure of chemicals. And so they couldn't make a determination about the types of chemicals that were used in many types of oil and gas drilling, but they did find that a certain type of PFAS was being used or had been used in the state of Colorado. They found that it was PTFE, which is otherwise known as Teflon, had been used or had been disclosed had been used at 282 wells, mostly in Weld County between 2012 and 2017. None of those were found to have occurred in Broomfield County. It was mostly in Weld, and the other ones were in Garfield. But nevertheless, it just shows that operators have, at least in the past, used PFAS substances. And so I just think that's how the two things might connect here. So I will leave it at that, and happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foote. Public comments are next. If there's anyone who'd like to speak on this topic, please step up to the podium. And I don't see anyone online. Questions from council are next. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against this item is later. Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Leslie.
Council, I'm just confused about the definition. You said the definition up here. I don't see it. Help me.
Oh, sorry, it's in the proposed ordinance. It wasn't on the slide.
Okay. I thought you were referring to the slide. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Councilmember Boone.
Thank you, Commissioner Mead. This is the result of a Section 18 request that I brought forth in July. And I read the PSR report, and it opened up an additional question to me. The PSR report seemed to indicate that there could be PFAS used in re-stimulating wells. Does this ordinance cover the prohibition of PFAS in re-stimulating wells?
I think it's a blanket prohibition, just like it would be for any other kind of substance that's under that subsection.
Okay, I just wanted that clarification. Thank you.
Any other council member questions? Crew at home? No? Awesome. Well, thank you, Mr. Foote.
Thank you.
There being no further comments, the public hearing is closed. Will the clerk please read proposed ordinance number 2172 by title?
Ordinance number 2172, amending certain sections of chapter 17-54 of the Broomfield Municipal Code regarding PFAS in oil and gas operations, second and final reading.
Is there a motion? Councilmember Lynn? Thank you.
I move that this ordinance be introduced effective 7 days after publication following passage.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward?
A second.
Are we good? Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll? Oh, did you?
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
Jezerski,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Lindstedt,
Yes.
Marshall,
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. And thank you for all of your work on this to our city and county attorney's office and Mr. Foote, our outside counsel. Our final item under council business this evening is the public hearing and council's consideration on second and final reading of proposed ordinance number 2173, amending certain sections of chapter 5 through 29 of the Broomfield Municipal Code related to tobacco product licensing. I'll now declare the public hearing open. We'll follow the city standard public hearing procedures as previously outlined. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. Jason Bolling, Director of Public Health, is here again. It's awfully good to see Ms. Allison Long behind him. This has been a long-awaited project. Jason.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. Actually, I'm going to turn it over to Allison Long, who is our in-house expert on control. So I'll let you know.
I have to say as well that Ms. Long is one of our very best presenters. We send everyone to the Allison Long school presentations before they actually come. Ms. Long.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Allison Long with Broomfield Public Health. I'm also here with Courtney Teeman from the Attorney's Office. So staff is requesting council's consideration of amending Broomfield Municipal Code Chapter 529 Tobacco Product Licensing to update certain sections to align with the new state of Colorado tobacco licensing law. And after a year of issuing local licenses, we've noticed a few additional areas that could be strengthened to improve our license requirements. As a reminder, or for those of you who are new on council, Broomfield Ordinance 2105 was signed into law on October 22nd of 2019. And that became that became effective a year later in October of 2020. And this created a licensing requirement for all tobacco retailers in Broomfield. After Broomfield's ordinance was passed, the state of Colorado then passed House Bill 21001, which required state licensing for tobacco retailers. And that became effective on July 14th of 2020. So after implementing Broomfield's tobacco licensing scheme and reviewing the new state law, Public Health and the Attorney's Office are recommending that the following sections of Broomfield's municipal code be updated. And the detailed wording is in your memo and is included as proposed ordinance 2173. So just to briefly summarize the proposed changes, the first section is updating the definition of sale or sell. And that really would mirror the state definition, which also includes possessing with the intent to sell. The next section, this one is regarding the 500-foot setback requirement from schools. We have about 6 retailers that are within 500 feet of a school, but they were granted licenses because they were operating before the law was passed. What we are recommending be changed regarding that is that the grandfather status be connected to the location rather than to the business owner. And so this would allow a business to sell to another business, and that new business would be able to sell tobacco. So an example would be a gas station selling to a new gas station. And so if the location is the grandfather, then they would be able to sell tobacco. The next section is to include a prohibition of issuing tobacco sales license in residentially zoned or used areas. So prohibiting that. And the next section defines acceptable forms of identification that retailers are required to examine prior to selling tobacco products, and it aligns with the state's listed acceptable forms of identification. So just making that more clear. Next section adds language to make it explicitly clear that the local licensing authority has the ability to impose one or more of the listed penalties for a violation of the law. And then the final section updates the penalty structure for licensing violations to mirror that of the state tobacco licensing violations. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Long. Mr. Ballin. We'll now proceed with public comments. Does any member of the public have any comments on this agenda item? There's no one online either. Next is questions from council. Councilmember Lee.
I'm just curious about that second bullet about the referring to the business. Is that aligned with the state guidelines?
Regarding the setbacks, the school setbacks?
Yeah, the 500 foot, that it would stay with the business even if the business sells to another business rather than it stopping at that point. My interest would be if that business sells, it would stop. But I want to make sure first that it is or is not in alignment with the state.
I'm wondering if Courtney may be better to respond to what the state code says on that.
Sure, it is in line with the
state. That's how the state grandfathers been, so they aren't going to prohibit, they don't prohibit, I can't remember the exact language, but when we looked at it, that's in line with what they've done as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Ward?
Thank you, Mayor. For the definition of tobacco, do e-cigarettes and vaping products also fall under this language?
Yes, thank you for the question. Vaping products are included in the definition of tobacco.
Okay, and then going off of Councilmember Leslie's question with regard to setbacks, let's just say, for example, we weren't to follow the state's guidelines. How would that play out since the state's guidelines differ from this local guidelines in terms of licensing?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, of course. So let's say, for example, we didn't have that particular bullet point in following the state guidelines of grandfathering in the location instead of the business owner. How would that affect licensing? Because we differ from the state. They're allowing the grandfather, we are not.
Right, so you have to have the local license as well, and so they would have the state license, but they wouldn't be able to get a local license. Therefore, they would not be able to sell tobacco if we don't change or amend our code. So if one of these, you said 5 locations? If one of the 6 locations, they decide to sell, whoever buys, if we don't change our code, sure, they could get a state license, but they couldn't get the local.
Okay, perfect. What is the benefit of aligning with the state instead of not grandfathering the locations? Because my concern is, we're within this 500-foot setback. We're trying to encourage students not to use tobacco products in any form, and we've seen a rise in teens, especially using vaping products.
Great. So thank you for the great question. You could certainly choose to not accept this change, in which case, for example, a gas station within that area would no longer be able to sell tobacco products. Part of the reason that we're here is we've heard concern from those types of business being when they go to sell their business that they would have a difficult time because they do make a lot of money, a lot of profit from tobacco sales. And so for them to sell a gas station in particular, to sell to another gas station, they feel like that puts them in a difficult position.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? All right, seeing none. Seeing none, will the clerk please read proposed ordinance number 2173 by title?
Ordinance number 2173, amending certain sections of Chapter 5-29 of the Broomfield Municipal Code relating to tobacco product licensing, second and final reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Ward?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Shaw?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Ward?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate staff bringing forward this amendment, and I support all the amendments with the exception of the grandfather status. I don't think we should be allowing that. I think we should be trying this should be one tactic we use to try to encourage students not to have as close of access, at least, to these types of products. Even though they may be underage. And I know there were some changes with regards to the IDs and verification of that, but people and teens can be very ingenuitive and will find a way to get around it. So just because of that one issue, I will not be voting for this.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward. Councilmember Leslie?
Yeah, I'm struggling with the same thing. I understand the business concern about selling, and of course, if you want to get Are any of those 6 sites gas stations? Are all of them gas stations?
No, they're not all gas stations.
Okay. I mean, because you have a gas station doesn't mean, and you sell a business, that the new business will be a gas station. I understand that. But I have the same struggle. I mean, one of our goals for Broomfield is the health of our citizens. And so and again, it's not like there's no other place for people to buy tobacco products or tobacco related products, but I'm in the same boat. I'm not going to vote for this. But I would like, as it stands, and I don't know, Mayor, can I make a suggestion on an amendment, or should we wait and if it doesn't pass, bring it back, or?
This is the second reading,
Yeah.
so it's the second and final reading. If you were to introduce an amendment right now, it would need a 2/3 majority to be considered.
Well, let me just sit on that, but I'll just vote against the motion, then. Thank you.
Fair enough. Mayor Pro Tem Jezierski.
Yeah, I would urge that we support this proposal as written, just for everyone's background. We didn't have any regulations up until 2019. Council did implement regulations at that point, and as was mentioned, the state followed us. And a lot of these businesses, I'm guessing, have been there, well before 2019, and maybe staff could comment on that, but I don't think it would be fair to them to basically just potentially make their business worthless if they wanted to sell it, particularly a gas station. I know gas stations, it's one of their major sources of income is going to be the sale of tobacco products. And well, I'm certainly against making those available to children, and that's why we again passed this in 2019. I'm also understanding that these businesses predated our regulation. It wouldn't be fair to them to really do a major hurdle for any of these businesses that they wanted to sell. And I guess I'd ask a question just to make sure I'm accurate on that. How many of them are gas stations, and do you know what types of businesses are the other ones as well?
Yes, thank you for the question. I do know. There is a smoker friendly, there's 2 7-Elevens, there's a Fast Market, King Supers, and a King Supers gas station. They need separate licenses.
Okay. So outside of the King Supers, I suspect the other ones would be, hurt fairly significantly if they weren't able to sell tobacco products. And well, again, while I do want to keep tobacco out of our children's hands, I have 4 kids. I'm not sure, if we prohibited these folks from selling their business, I'm not sure that that's going to change or push the needle one way or the other. So I guess going back to the businesses, I think it would be an undue hardship on them if we restricted them from being able to sell tobacco products if they wanted to sell their company.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We also raised the age to 21, and the requirement of the licensing does raise the bar on enforcement if there's any underage sales. So we did 2 things before the state that really are making a difference, and those regulations apply to every location, regardless of proximity to residents. So any other further discussion? All right, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ward,
No.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cullen,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jezierski,
Yes.
Leslie,
No.
Lim,
Yes.
Lindsted,
Yeah.
Marshallshire,
Yes.
Schaff.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes 8-2. The city and county attorney's report is next. Ms. Rogers, do you have a report?
No, thank you.
Thank you. The city and county manager's report is next. Ms. Hoffman, do you have a report?
There's just no way that we can get out of here at this particular time, so I'm gonna have one for about 45 minutes. No, I do not, Mayor, thank you.
And there's no legislative update this evening. The meeting of the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority was adjourned earlier. There is no business before the Arista Local Improvement District Board of Directors and no special reports or requests for future action this evening. That concludes the items on this evening's agenda. Is there any other business to come before council? There being no further business, this council meeting is adjourned.